Wojtek, for those who don't know, you can go to YouTube, type in Wojtek the Soldier Bear, go to Wikipedia, type it in. This is a real bear that was adopted by the Polish soldiers of the Anders army in what was then British-occupied Iran. They adopted this bear cub. He travelled with the unit and became like a mascot. But as he grew up, he was carrying not individual shells, but helped unload cases of artillery shells. There are photos of him doing that. And I remember on a flight, I can't remember if it was to or from Poland. I think it was from Poland to England in Christmas 2008. I was reading an in-flight magazine like Krakow in your pocket, and there was a tiny little item about some people in Edinburgh wanted to build a statue for Wojtek the Soldier Bear, and I just was reading that in my sort of airline state, and I thought, they're building one in Scotland, why not build one in Kraków? And one of my sort of rules for life is, if you ask yourself why not, just go ahead and do it, rather, as in often, not always in business, but often in business, you're thinking about something, just say yes and see what happens. So don't find reasons not to, find reasons to do things. So that led me to, and I wasn't an expert. I was vaguely aware of this bear, but I'm not a historian. I'm very much a generalist. I studied economics, but I'm a generalist, not a specialist. And so I talked to a few people. I said, what do you think about the idea of a statue for this bear? And everyone I talked to said, that's a really good idea. And quite often because one of the things, when I have an idea, then the thing to do is to talk to people about your idea. And quite often you see the smile wiped from their face and they think, oh no, Richard's come up with another of his insane ideas. And, really he ought to do something normal for once. But a lot of people say, that's not a bad idea. So, and I went to the school director. My children were then, I've got 3 children who are now all young adults. They were at a primary school in Podstawówka 70, primary school 72 in Kraków. And I went to the school director and said, do you think we could do something in the school about this bear? And that was a sort of inspired move, because the school director said, well, you need to talk to our staff about this. So I went to a staff meeting, and the school history teacher said to me, and by this stage I spoke Polish pretty well, that we're talking, I've passed the Polish language test and everything. She said, and I won't say it in Polish, I'm extremely embarrassed. I'm a history teacher. I don't know about this story. And the school designated their school annual fest in their school fair to the theme of Wojtek. And there were dances and there were painting competitions and a geography competition, and they composed a song. And it just suddenly hit me that this bear is an incredible opportunity to educate people about history. And, I think that history really matters, and it's not just Polish history, it's history in general. I think every country should know its own history and be aware of other countries' histories, and not only from their own perspective, but also through other perspectives. If Poles are thinking about Israel, think what it's like to be an Israeli from an Israeli perspective. If you're an Israeli, think about what it's like to be a Pole from a Pole's perspective. Brits should think about that for the Irish for the Brits, because, if you understand it, it makes it properly, and you don't just, history isn't about glorifying your country at the expense of everyone else, but, understand you can be a patriotic person, very loyal to the place you're from, and empathetic to the other nations and cultures and countries you come into contact with. And Wojtek's got that in spades, because there were Jews and Poles in the Anders army who fought together. They fought together with the Allies in a great cause, and everyone loves the bear. And the bear is a bit like, I made the comparison with the British royal family, that the British royal family, until recently, we're recording this in March 2021, is quite apolitical, in the sense that they're not actively involved in party politics. So you can be loyal to the institution of the royal family in Britain without necessarily sort of saying you've got one political perspective or another. That has been the case. Well, that's true of the bear, that national symbols in Poland are quite divisive. That there was a time when everyone was very loyal to the Polish Pope and the Catholic Church, but even now the Church is quite divisive in modern Poland. But the bear doesn't really tell you what you have to believe or who you have to believe, and everyone loves a bear, and children love bears, and that's been true not just in the context of Wojtek, but obviously Winnie the Pooh, and China's national symbol is the bear. I wrote an article for a newspaper called Poland's Panda, because I felt that actually Wojtek can, and to some extent he's now in the history textbooks in Poland. He is effectively Poland's panda, because bears are incredibly attractive to children, sort of humanoid animals. So I saw that through the bear, you can't go to a school and say, let's learn about yet another disaster in Polish history, another unknown Holocaust where people were led at gunpoint and put in cattle trucks and shipped out to Kazakhstan and Siberia. I mean, it's a horrible, it wasn't the only horrible thing that happened in the Second World War. There were 733 orphans arrived in Wellington Harbour in New Zealand in 1944. They were kids whose parents had died in the Soviet camps. There were refugee camps in British Rhodesia, in Mexico, in India, in Uganda, in Kenya. All these refugee camps full of Polish people who had been deported via Siberia, scattered all over the world. Many of the ones who got to the camps were maybe the lucky ones, unless they were psychologically or physically wrecked by the experience. But you can't just go to school. Let's look into this lovely little project. No, that's not going to work, because it's just yet another Second World War catastrophe. If you go to the school and say, let's do a project about the bear, then a smart history teacher thinks, yes, well, the children will learn about the bear, but along the way, you can't understand the story of the bear without having to think, why were there 250,000, not just men, women and children in Iran in the 1940s? Where did they come from? How did they get there? So that was my sort of insight, that the bear brings Polish people together, and foreigners, it also brings the international spotlight on Polish history, because everyone's interested in a bear that ate cigarettes, drank beer, wrestled with soldiers and fought the Nazis. It's a compelling story, and people's typical reaction is, you're making that's not true. And then you show them the YouTube videos, and, oh well, maybe Richard isn't on mushrooms or whatever. So actually the statue project I kind of postponed for a while and just brought people together doing Wojtek projects. But then as Wojciech Narębski got older and older, I thought I really want to get this statue up before he dies. And so I came back to the statue project, and my role was a sort of publicist. I built a big Facebook group, gave a TEDx talk, put the spotlight on other people's projects, and found, as with my businesses, I mentioned I did it through other people. Kazimierz Cholewa, who was the president of the Park Jordana Association, he did the heavy lifting on all the bureaucracy, and boy, is there a lot of bureaucracy to put a statue up in a historic park. And there should be. I'm not saying, people say, oh, the bureaucracy, it does stop people, building a Mickey Mouse statue in the wrong place. I mean, you don't want that. So with the help of a lot of other people on a long journey, we got the statue up, and I'm very, I feel very privileged to have had a small role in drawing more attention to that story. And it's not the only thing I've done, but I feel it's an achievement.